Okay, this is Frank P. Marone Jr. from Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours, and I am here today at the Moses McLean Farm on Oak Ridge, the Gettysburg National Military Park. Moses McLean was born on June the 17th, 1804, and he passed away on September the 30th, 1870. He was a Democratic member of the United States House of Representatives from the state of Pennsylvania. He was born near Gettysburg upon his father's farm, William McLean, in Carroll's Tract, Pennsylvania. As a young man, he studied the law profession and he was admitted to the bar in 1825. And he began practicing in Gettysburg. Moses McLean was elected as a Democrat to the 29th Congress and supported the declaration of war against Mexico during the Mexican-American War. After his term of service had expired, he resumed practicing law in Gettysburg. He would later return to politics briefly as a conservative member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in 1855, representing the Know Nothing political movement. He continued practicing law all the way up to the point of his death in Gettysburg in 1870. And this here is his farm. You can see his barn there to the left and then the house to the right. Though during the Battle of Gettysburg, he was not in this house. He actually owned a house in town of Gettysburg, which is today 11 Baltimore Street. That house has a artillery shell stuck on the southern side of it, most likely meaning that the artillery that fired it was Union artillery from Cemetery Hill on July 2nd of 1863. But we're going to talk today about the McLean farm that lies here on the northern side of Gettysburg along the Mummersburg Road, right at the foot of Oak Hill, which today the Eternal Light Peace Memorial sits right behind. Now, in 1863, he rented this farm to a man named David H. Beams. David had been drafted in October of 1862, and he was serving with the 165th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment, which was a 9-month regiment. The 165th was not at the Battle of Gettysburg. At that time, they were serving in Dix's Peninsula Campaign in Virginia, and he mustered out later that month. This is the original house that David and his wife, Harriet, and their 3-year-old child were forced out of on July 1st, 1863, as Confederate Colonel O'Neill's infantry moved across the fields under heavy fire from both the Union 1st and 11th Corps, as well as artillery. They returned to this farm to find their belongings stolen and destroyed. A claim after the war was given to the United States government for over $1,100 in loss and damages, but nothing was ever recovered. Now, the barn that we see here belonged to Moses McLean, located here at the foot of Oak Hill. In the late morning of July 1st, the open-faced Oak Hill became more and more important as a terrain feature and an artillery platform that both sides raced to seize. This farm sat in between the vacant spot where the right flank of the 1st Corps and the left flank of the 11th Corps rested. Confederate forces arrived on the field from the north under Robert Rhodes, who won the race to this farm, and he occupied it around noon on July 1st, 1863. Not long after that, moving into the plain beneath them from the south came Federal reinforcements. These troops, under the command of Colonel George von Amsberg, were tasked with seizing and holding Oak Hill, an impossibility now with Rhodes up on the hill occupying it both with infantry and artillery. However, those Union troops were able to seize the McLean barn that we now look at and its base, and they actually captured about 50 Confederate soldiers from Edward O'Neill's Alabama Brigade. This tree stump, though not being an original battle witness, was growing shortly thereafter, and I do have a photograph that I'll post of it. Now, Captain Francis Ursh of the 45th New York Volunteers would be awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his action in leading an assault of 4 companies on this barn. The barn could not be held as Confederate tide rolled up the Federal lines in the afternoon, forcing all Union soldiers to retreat south through the town and take up a new position on Cemetery Hill. As I previously mentioned, originally occupying the barn were soldiers from Alabama. Attacking them were the men from the 45th New York. Each side had a man named Short. They were from Germany, as this was a German regiment, the 45th New York. Rudolph Schwartz had settled in New York. His brother had settled in Alabama. They met for the first time since emigrating to the United States here in this barn, as McLean's barn, 45th New York, were sent to flush out the rebels from the barn. After a brief reunion, the Alabama brother was marched off to captivity as a prisoner, and Rudolph later was killed in action that day. This has been the Moses McLean Farm here on Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours.